presentation. And I also would like to thank Mr. Ambassador for taking the time and coming to this lecture tonight, and also all of you, thank you for battling the traffic of Heliopolis. It was very difficult for me to actually come today because, first of all, Heliopolis is very difficult, the traffic is horrible, and also that combined with the fact that I don't know the way to the Polish Center. So this is my first time, and I really thank you all for coming tonight. Tonight is just something I was always thinking about, even when I was a little student at Brown University and the Cairo University. I was always thinking about Thebes in particular, all these temples and how they were located in the way that they are on right now. What was the system that brought about the creation of all these sanctuaries together? It was very important for me to look at ancient Egyptians and how they thought about their sanctuaries instead of the rituals that were performed in there. That combined with me getting introduced to theoretical archaeology and theoretical thinking about archaeology, and also ritual landscape as the new, or one of the new fields of exploration in the field of archaeology. Before I actually start working about the system that brought together or combined all these sanctuaries on the West Bank and the East Bank together, and what made Karnak Temple in its place and Luxor Temple in its place, and all these temples of millions of years on the West Bank located in the way that they are on right now. I'd like just to explain one little thing. If we're talking about the ritual landscape, so how are you fixing this? Okay. Oh, sorry. I'm not doing this. Yeah. There you go. So do I have to change it, or do you change it?
You can change.
Okay. So the eastern bank of Thebes has two major sanctuaries. There are the complex of temples of Karnak and the Temple of Luxor. Temple of Karnak being to the north and Luxor to the south of Karnak. And then so tell me what's wrong I'm doing. Okay, no, sorry. So we all know, if we look at this Google Earth map, Luxor Temple is being to the south of Karnak, and those two sanctuaries were connected in the past with the Avenue of Rams that's over 2 kilometers. The very idea that these two sanctuaries had to be connected together made me think about what are the reasons of connection. Why do we have to connect two sanctuaries together? Karnak, just I'll give you a little bit of idea that all of us know the sanctuary of Karnak and the complex of temples there and how they were built in history, but I'll go over the history of these two sanctuaries together with you. Karnak started pretty much in the Middle Kingdom with the oldest court of the Karnak Temple being right behind right in the middle of the temple right now. Probably built during the Middle Kingdom. Even there are clues that they're probably built in the 11th dynasty, started working in the 11th dynasty. Then everything comes right in front of all the additions being right in front of the court of the Middle Kingdom, and even in the Dynasty 18, buildings were built by King Thutmose III right behind the Middle Kingdom court. The axis is from west to east, which goes with the regular course of the sun, the cyclical solar journey. Then comes the other axis from north to south. Going north to south, that has to do with something else. If the orientation of temples in Egypt, the gods' temples in general has to do with the cycle of the sun, so they have to be oriented east-west. So we have an axis right now that goes from the north going to the south. That is completely different from what we used to have. That means this complex of temples had to be connected with something else that doesn't have to do with the solar journey of the sun. In the north-south axis, you have additions and pylons were built by several kings, particularly during Dynasty 18, and the major work has been done by Thutmose III and Horemheb as well. Here's just to give you some idea of this major buildings in Karnak Temple, starting with the Avenue of Rams. The Avenue of Rams is a key in explanation of why these sanctuaries had to be connected together, because those Avenue of Rams were actually processional ways. That means celebration had to be done and go through these pathways, which will explain why the ritual landscape had to be formed in such a way. What we call it, the first pylon is, of course, from Dynasty, from the late history of Pharaonic Egypt, Dynasty 30, and then comes one of the most important things is this tripartite chapel, that mostly for the parks of Ammon, Mut, and Khonsu. The very fact that we have bark stations for these temples means during certain days of the year, these statues, cult images of Amun-Re, his consort, and their son, have to leave the temple of Karnak and go through this processional ways to be connected with other acts. Of course, the major deities in the Karnak temple is Amun-Re, Mut, and their son Khonsu. A number of additions have been built, particularly during Dynasty 18, Ramses II, and Seti I adding the great hypostyle hall. And all what we've seen here is presentation of different gods. But mostly is Amun-Re being the dominant god in this form. Amun, in his creative form, is Amun-Re. And of course, obelisk has been erected by Thutmose III, Thutmose I, Hatshepsut, and a number of other pharaohs as well. The sacred lake being one of these important components of the conflicts because of its connection with the creation myth. In cosmogonies, all lands in Egyptian theology were just, the universe was a moveless ocean. So the existence of a lake inside the temple is just a symbol of this very primeval ocean from which everything came to be, and on top of which the Creator God created the universe. So having the major image of Amun-Re, its creator form in the Karnak temple, combined with a component that is a sacred lake, reminds us with the creation myth, the cosmogony of Thebes. Then we'll explain a little bit about this north-south axis, and as I said, most of the additions to the pylons and the courtyards and everything was added by Thutmose III and Horemheb as well. The other sanctuary that we're talking about in the east bank of Thebes is Luxor Temple. The two were connected together by the Avenue of Rams, and I'll show you an image of it. If we look at the Luxor Temple, its orientation is completely different from any orientation of a temple we know in ancient Egypt. Orientations of God temples usually is east-west. This is almost canonically. Its established form of the temples of gods. It have to be oriented from east-west. The Luxor Temple is completely different. It's oriented from south to north in order to meet with the other axis of Karnak Temple. That one right here, and the other way, you'll have the Temple of Luxor just oriented specifically and intentionally to meet with this axis here. And between the two of them was a processional way that connects all of them, that is the Avenue of Rams. So the orientation shift of Luxor Temple is deliberate. It had to be oriented this way in order to be connected with Karnak Temple. If it was to be oriented east-west, it would be parallel to Karnak Temple. But that orientational shift was, as I said, deliberate in order to be connected with Karnak Temple. What we first see, of course, that temple started by King Amenhotep III, and you see the colonnade and then the courtyard and everything. Additions were made by Ramses II with the obelisk and the first pylon, we see the decorative scheme of Luxor Temple is almost one thing entirely. That is the Feast of Opet, when Amun-Re leaves Karnak Temple and goes to visit Luxor Temple. That is the dominant theme of the decorative scheme in Luxor Temple. And as you can see here, all these images of the bark of Amun coming into the temple of Luxor. And in fact, right here, this tripartite chapel was originally outside of the buildings, the constructions of Amenhotep III. And then it was enclosed within the construction of Ramses III. So initially this was outside the perimeter of the temple completely. And it was converted into a tripartite chapel to contain the barks of Amun, Mut, and Khonsu. So that was a bark station, the last bark station. The way between Karnak and Luxor had numbers of stations where priests would be stopped for rest and put the boat of Amun on this bark station. That was the last one. Accounts has it as there were about 6 bark stations on all the avenue of France between Karnak and Luxor. And those, of course, the bark stations were originally started by Hatshepsut and then converted by Ramses II into tripartite chapel. As I said, the main feature, or the main the theme of the decorative program in Luxor Temple is completely the Feast of Opet, where the bark of Amun, the major form of Amun right here, is different from the form of Amun in Karnak Temple. In Karnak Temple, Amun being Amun-Re, but in Luxor he's not referred to as Amun-Re. He's Amun-Mim or Amun-Kamutef, which is the fertility form of Amun. As I said, mostly Feast Opet, the celebration and the sacrificial animals and everything else. One shift in the decorative program has to do with that little sanctuary here, these little 2 rooms, the divine birth rooms. It has to do with the divine birth of this king, Amenhotep III. We all know Amenhotep III, his mother was not Egyptian, so he was not supposed to be the pharaoh, so he had to rely on political propaganda that is cemented with theology and its connection with mythology. So in these 2 rooms, he depicted the divine birth of his own, claiming that his mother has been the consort of Amun-Re, the earthly wife of Amun-Re, and he has been, she gave birth to him because she is the divine wife of Amun-Re. And of course, all these themes you all know very well. The scene of Mutamuya, the mother of Amenhotep III, being pregnant, as you can see. And then the important thing in these scenes is actually the focus in such a scene, where Khnum is fashioning the baby, Amenhotep III, in the womb of his mother. He's not making one fetus, he's making 2. One for the material form of Amenhotep III, and the other one for the Ka of Amenhotep III. So I hope you can make out these images right here. So what you see here is these 2 little children. The material form of Amenhotep III, the baby, and then the Ka of the baby being fashioned by Amenhotep III. Bringing in the Ka of Amenhotep III into the decorative program of Luxor Temple, which is completely focusing on the Opet feast, that has to bring us to ask some questions. Why we have such a theme that does not really go in homogeneity with the Opet feast? So there is something that we have to think about. What connects the glory of Ka with the Opet feast? Okay, the Opet feast connects Luxor Temple with Karnak Temple. And I'll continue on to explain to you all this. Just an image of the Amenhotep III prior his coronation as a king, the part of his divine birth story. If we cross the river, the major sanctuaries on the western bank of Thebes all have to do with the temples of millions of years, starting with the temple of Mentuhotep II, dynasty 11, then later on in dynasty 18, all built in the Enid, in the valley of Amenhotep, of Mentuhotep II. This was considered by the Egyptians the valley of Amenhotep II, Mentuhotep II. Of course, that is the question is what was in top, and all these archaeological questions about the archaeology of the temple of Mentuhotep II, the founder of dynasty, the founder of the Middle Kingdom, and then the temple of Hatshepsut being a copy of the temple of Mentuhotep II. The temple of Hatshepsut, the main things that we can see here is repetition of the divine birth story, which has to do with her being a woman and being a pharaoh at the same time, so relying on mythology as well to prove that she is a legitimate ruler of Egypt. It's the same thing that Mentuhotep III has done after her. The other decorative scheme in the temple of Hatshepsut is mostly something to do with her expedition to Punt, presentations, different gods, sanctuaries or chapels for multiple gods, Anubis, Osiris, and the other ones. But the other important thing, that Amun-Re has a place inside the temple of Hatshepsut, like every other god as well. So, a continuation of temples of millions of years on the west bank of Thebes, and this is just an overview of the temple of Amenhotep III in Khomekheten with the colossi of Memnon. Those temples, and of course that one is the Ramesseum from above, and more of these temples being, almost all of them taking the linear form. They're all in one line. All these temples of millions of years on one line, expanding from the north going south. And the southernmost temple of millions of years is the temple of Ramses III, that is built in Medinet Habu. Medinet Habu, there is a sacred place called Tel Jimma, or the Mount of Jimma, that is originally clearly mentioned in the cosmogony of Khonsu, that is the cosmogony or the creation myth of Thebes. That is the southernmost temple of millions of years. The question is, do we have any other temples of millions of years to the south of this temple? So far, we don't. So this is the final destination of all these temples of millions of years. They all stopped here. This is the southernmost part of it. The journey, if there is any journey, has to stop here. This part is very sacred. This spot is very sacred because of the Tel Jimma, and then comes the early New Kingdom temple of Thutmose III, right here, dedicated to Amun-Re. So the question is, when we have these eastern sanctuaries, that is Karnak and Luxor, with one of them that is deliberately oriented to from the south to the north in order to meet with Karnak, and being connected with Karnak via the Avenue of Rams. We cross the river, we find that in the sacred place, that is the valley of Mentuhotep II, two major temples were initiated and built there. And then comes all the temples of millions of years, taking this linear form, going parallel to the river. And the southernmost spot is Tel Jimma, where Medinet Habu is. So we have pretty much three major sites: Karnak, Luxor, and Tel Jimma. What I want to say about the mythological genesis of these three major sanctuaries that forms the ritual landscape of Thebes, we have to consider the forms of Amun-Re. Amun-Re is a creator god. In Egyptian theology, a creator god has to be a sustainer. So that's the second element, or the second job of a creator god. He creates everything, and then he has to sustain. He has to provide people with everything, and animals, all his creatures with food so they can be sustained. That means he contains the quality of fertility within him. Any creator God, even Atom and Ray, had the Atom and Ray, for example, as a sustainer, he has the 7 cows. The 7 cows, that's pretty much his ability to sustain and to provide fertility for the land and the people. The other aspect that is very important is a creator God has to have the ability to penetrate the underworld and be a god of the dead as well. So the cycle could continue. That's why we have the sun is always collaborating with Osiris, or identified with Osiris, Ray and Osiris being the same one, even in the tomb of Nefertari. So, in order to be more clear, I would like to just go with you and explore a little bit what is the landscape after I introduce you to the major sanctuaries in Thebes. What is the word landscape in general, what this term means, and what shaped this ritual landscape in Thebes. So, from a linguistic point of view, landscape is a blossomous word whose core meaning is very broad. Etymologically, the word landscape corresponds to the German word Landschaft, meaning a sheaf or a patch of cultivated ground that is very small in scale. This usage had gone out of vogue by the 11th century, and new extended meaning with political connotation was ascribed to the word. 6 centuries later, the term re-emerged in the 17th and 18th century, closely associated with the artistic genre of landscape paintings, in which a painter expresses his own way of seeing or extolling nature. In such a manner, the word was introduced into English as a painter's technical term. In modern usage, the words landscape, nature, and scenery share common core meaning and are often used interchangeably to imply nature. However, apart from its lexical meaning, the term landscape is very hard to define in social studies. Geographers, historians, anthropologists, urban planners, political scientists, beside archaeologists, all have grappled with landscape issues, particularly its definition. And it's not my intention here to present the diverse definitions of landscape. I would rather present a common understanding of landscape in archaeology. Previously, archaeologists tend to view human landscape mainly in terms of demography, social interaction, economic resources, and risks. They also focus on topography, technology, resources, and people's patterns of land use, rather than on people's perceptions of their land. According to Carl Crumley's definition, and this is, by the way, one of the most common archaeological definitions of landscape, landscape is a material manifestation of the relation between humans and an environment. Also, in a more elaborate definition, John Barrett defines landscape, and I paraphrase his definition, as the entire surface over which people moved and within which they congregated. That surface was given meaning as people acted upon it within the context of various demands, obligations, and I add on my own, and intellectual and theological perceptions. Therefore, landscape is considered a human product created according to a cultural framework and is not merely a cluster of buildings on the ground. This is how I wanted to explain it, really. All these sanctuaries is not just clusters of buildings on the ground. They all had to be connected with a theological framework. Within this understanding, the study of evidence for settlement patterns and substance became the main concern of landscape archaeology, whereas the study of monuments associated with rituals and ceremonies fell within the province of social archaeology. In the same manner of complexity, the term ritual landscape emerged in British archaeology in the 1980s. This term, also called sacred landscape, was coined in order to describe extensive sacred tracts clustered around Stonehenges. These tracts were seemingly dedicated to ceremonial purposes during the Neolithic and early Bronze Age. In fact, it's how I would like to explain ritual landscape. In fact, ritual landscape could be perceived as a cultural phenomenon because its formation in any given culture is influenced by a distinctive array of mythical events connected with spiritual or supernatural beings. Such events conceptualize and classify the natural world and geographical area. And I just remembered that we have talked about geographical compositions of some place and its psychological impact on the people living around this site, like the Enid, the valley, or a huge mountain, how it is psychologically effective in the around the people, in the hearts and minds of the people living around it. So they give it more, make it more sacred feature. But this is not the case in Thebes. Thebes, in most cases, are flat land, except for the Enid in the West Bank. So that means any positioning or localization of these sanctuaries has to do with theological framework that had been already put in place before the construction of these temples. And I continue. Therefore, it could be inferred that ritual landscape plays a major role in explaining a religion's doctrine as well as its mythologies. In other words, extracting the conceptual meaning of a ritual landscape demands deeper analysis of the mythologies that created it. So, what is the myth that created the ritual landscape, according to my understanding? The myth that created the ritual landscape in Thebes is the creation myth. In the case of the Theban ritual landscape, I would argue that the myth of the Theban cosmogony had the paramount effect in its formation. In fact, it is believed that in the mythological system of highly developed religions like that of ancient Egypt, cosmogonies are dominant myths. People are interested in mythology and studies of myth. They have a hierarchy of myths. They put creation myths or cosmogonies as the most effective and influential myth of all. They put it on a higher level, and then comes every other myth after that. Cosmogonies are dominant myths that enjoy a special prestige because they reveal a series of fabulous events that explain how the world and all creatures came to being, and emphasize the principles which govern the cosmic process and human existence. The Theban cosmogony is indeed a conspicuous example of theological syncretism that was politically motivated. The Theban kings of Dynasty 11, who managed to reunite the country after a period of political fragmentation and social upheaval, initiated a program to promote Ammon, whose cult swiftly penetrated the local religious system of Thebes during the first intermediate period and eclipsed the cult of the original god of the city, Min, who was the god of fertility. In addition to gaining popularity among the political and administrative elite of Thebes, Ammon was presented as a universal god who acted on the different grounds of the city of Thebes. So in the formation of the cosmogony of Thebes, the theologians made it clear that Ammon-Ra had moved around the landscape of Thebes. All the geographies of Thebes had been witnessing acts of creation by Ammon-Ra. In this manner, fabulous events tied him to the geographical areas of Thebes. Moreover, principles of earlier creation myths were meticulously interwoven in order to present Ammon-Ra as the creator of the universe. Before delving into discussing the Theban cosmogony, it is worth mentioning that while the only document in our hands for this cosmogony dates to the Ptolemaic period, archaeological and textual evidence for Ammon's fabulous acts of creation and its related events and locales are abundant in the Theban archaeological sites. Ammon's acts of creation is inherent in the text of the cosmogony of the Khonsu cosmogony at Karnak, And the text, I would like just to read some of the text with you, and then we'll analyze the text and see how this cosmogony shaped the creation, the ritual landscape of Thebes. It goes like, words spoken by Ammon, and bear with me a little bit while I'm reading this cosmogony of Khunsu. Words spoken by Ammon-Re, king of gods, august being, chief of all gods, the great god, lord of the sky, earth, the other world, water, and mountains, the august soul of the Kim-At-Eth serpent. I'd like to just highlight the fact that Ammon-Re, the creator god, is one of his forms, is the august soul of Kim-At-Eth, the serpent. That is a form of Ammon-Re that will have to perform all the acts of creation. So we have Ammon-Re, and then we have the serpent, Kim-At-Eth. Father of the semen. This is the epithets of Kim-At-Eth as a creator god. Father of the semen, mother of the egg, who engendered every living. So the creation has been given to Kim-At-Eth. The head and soul who made the gods, who formed the land with his semen. Father of the fathers of the Agdwad in the tomb chamber, in the necropolis, in the place of Jimma. Another important locale that is mentioned here, who created this place in noon, overflowing seed the first time. The first snake made heaven because of his desire. Earth came into existence. The sky spat forth an egg, like the egg of a falcon. It was the face of missing earth. That is how the second snake came into being, with the face of a beetle likewise, while the cow before his predecessor went forth, and it goes on. Ammon, in that name of his called Betah, created the egg that came forth from Noon, and then we have a lacuna. As Betah of the Her gods and the Noon goddesses, who created heaven and earth, ejaculated and made it, being the egg probably, at this place in the lake, which was created in Tatenan. He fertilized the egg, and the eight came into existence from it in the district around the Agdwad. He languished there in Noon, in the great flood. He knew them. His neck received them. He traveled to Thebes in his form of Khunsu. We see that Ammon-Re is actually moving around the landscape of Thebes. He created his throat from the water in the flood. Thus came into existence his name of Khunsu, the great in Thebes, the august being in the seed. He turned his face to the seed. It was this Maat that created that great one who raised herself as a power from the ground. A necklace on his breast fashioned like the likeness of thereof, brought from Lacuna, highland in Noon. Thus came into existence Thebes in her name of Enid, or the valley. That's very important reference to Thebe. The city is being part of the acts of creation. Thebe has been created like human beings, animals, and everything. So it had a special act of creation was dedicated for the city of Thebes. It came into being along with everything else in its name for the valley. In this narrative, it is discernible that Ammon-Re assumes two different forms during the work of creation. The first is zoomorphic, being the first serpent, the Irta and Kemat-Eth serpent. The second form is anthropomorphic, being Ptah and Khunsu. These primordial forms of Ammon-Re performed different tasks during the act of creation. While the first serpent, probably the Irta, made heaven and earth, the anthropomorphic Amun-Ptah undertook the rest of the creation work. The myth also emphasizes the androgynous nature of Ammon-Re. Being Ammon-Re has to show himself in a more of androgynous form, meaning he's male and female at the same time. And this is the only way creation could happen. the androgeneity of Amun-Re was very essential to the act of creation. The myth also emphasizes the androgynous nature of Amun-Re, describing him as the father of the semen and mother of the egg. Amun-Re's androgyny is what brought about the cosmic egg, which in its turn a symbolism of perfection, potentiality, and fertility. Creating the egg was a crucial step in the process of creation, because it's a symbol of perfection, potentiality, and fertility. From the cosmic egg came out the Agdwat, or the elements of the universe. It should also be noted that the death of Amun-Re's serpent form and the Agdwat, because Irta, the serpent form, and the Agdwat of the Ashmuni, they ended up being buried in Tel Jimma. They crossed the river. They rested in the west. And crossing the river and resting in the west, two euphemisms of death in ancient Egypt. So where the Agdwat lies and the Irta image of Amun-Re is actually Tel Jimma. So we have two major spots right now connected with Amun-Re, where he created the universe incarnate, and then Tel Jimma, where the Irta form and the Agdwat being buried in Tel Jimma. It should also be noted that the death of Amun-Re's serpent form and the Agdwat and their entombment in the necropolis at Tel Jimma was a careful step on the part of the theologians of Amun-Re, for it represents him as a dead god, and consequently expands the sphere of his theological influence to the world of the dead, a world that was always restricted to Osiris. In addition, funeral rituals are bound to be regularly performed for the dead god and the Agdwat. Equally significant here is the connection between Tel Jimma and actual Theban locale and the event of the death and entombment of the Agdwat. In fact, this is the only connection in the cosmogony of Khonsu between an act of creation and an actual Theban locale, aside from the fact that the creation of the city of Thebes was among the primordial acts of creation. Nevertheless, other textual sources from Thebes relate two significant localities to the primordial time. On the southeast wall and the east-south wall of his open court at Luxor Temple, Pharaoh Ramses II left a dedicatory text that describes his construction as situated on the proper ground in the precinct of the primordial event or time, and the text reads as follows. He has made his monument for his father, Lacuna, and includes statues, Lacuna, a resting place for the Lord of the gods in his festival of Egypt. That's a clear indication of as to the function of the court of Amun-Re that was built by Ramses II. It's a resting place for the Lord of the gods, that is Amun-Re, in his festival of Egypt, or the Obit feast, to make his halts at the beginnings of every 10 days. He made it for him upon the right ground, the precinct of the primeval time. So Luxor Temple is also connected with the act of the primeval time, that is the act of creation. So we have so far Tel Jimma, that witnessed the entombment of the Irta form, and then we have Luxor, where an act or the visit during this Obit feast had to be performed in Luxor Temple. So Luxor Temple is clearly here connected with the process of creation, and is specifically said by Ramses II, he made it for him, Amun-Re, upon the right ground, the precinct of the primeval time. Lanibel mentions that 3 other unpublished architraves inscriptions at Luxor Temple from the time of Amenhotep III earlier referred to this temple as the precise location of the primordial event. So even the time of Amenhotep III, from the time of Amenhotep III, we have textual reference to Luxor being described as the precise location of the primordial event. Acts of creation had been connected with that spot, that is the Luxor temple. The second Theban sacred space that was also associated with the primordial event is Karnak. In the descriptions of the high priest of Amun-Re and King Herhor of Dynasty 21, in the temple of Khonsu at Karnak, Amun-Re clearly identifies Karnak as the precise location of the primordial event. That is Amun-Re's assignment. Amun-Re explaining Karnak as the place that is connected with the primordial event. And Amun-Re says, words spoken by Amun-Re, Lord of thrones of the two lands, preeminent in Karnak, welcome, welcome my son, my beloved, Siamun Herhor. You have illumined Benben anew, the palace that is my predilection, the precise location of the primordial event. So the word primordial event is clearly connected with three locales right now: Karnak, Luxor, and Tel Jemmel. It all has to do with that time. The primordial event is the creation event itself. In such a manner, we're left with three locales in the Theban geography that are strongly connected with Amun-Re's acts of creation. Tel Jemmel, plumply described as the necropolis where the dead form of Amun-Re and the Agduad are buried. Karnak and Luxor, both having been identified as the precise precinct of the primordial event. However, it is evident that Karnak was envisaged as a primordial mound where creation took place and where Amun-Re resides. This brings up the question as to what act of creation the area of Luxor temple precisely witnessed. So if we have the creation, all acts of creation being done in Karnak, then the burial of the Irtaz being done in Tel Jemmel. So what happened exactly in Luxor temple? If we connect in Luxor temple to the process of creation itself, what exactly happened there? What is the fabulous event that took place in Luxor temple? In this regard, I would like to reiterate Lanny Bill's identification of Luxor temple as a temple constructed specifically for the revitalization of the royal Ka during the Opet feast. Such a theory remains uncontested, and I would like to briefly expound on it here. A passing glance at the program of war release at Luxor temple would make it clear that the dominant form, if not the only form, of Amun-Re in Luxor is his fertility form, the epiphallical Amun-Min or Kamutep. In fact, fertility or sexual potency is also among the principal concepts of the Ka in ancient Egyptian religion. So one could say that Luxor temple is where the creative force of Amun-Re, meaning the Ka of Amun-Re, resides in this temple. A revitalization of the divine Ka is needed annually in order to ensure fertility in the cosmos. Hence, Amun-Re's annual visit to his Ipit seat, that's Luxor temple, for the revitalization of his own divine Ka during the Ipit feast. The fact that such visit is never alluded to in the Theban cosmogony indicates that the creation process has been ritualized, and a celebration of the primordial events became an integral part of the social and religious lives of the Theban community. Such a revitalization process naturally lifted its impact on the Theban ritual and urban landscapes. A processional way was founded not only in order to connect the two temples, that is Karnak and Luxor, but also to demarcate the path of the god. Also, the Ipit feast was this time of year when the cult of the royal Ka came into play, taking advantage of the ritual atmosphere in the Ipit receipt, the Luxor temple, and the cult of the divine Ka and that of the royal Ka became closely connected. So, I'll go back to the main principles of a creator God. He has to create. sustain through his fertility image, and then be able to rejuvenate or bring back the dead to life. So Amun-Re being the creator god in Karnak, then his fertility form resides in Luxor, then his dead form resides in Tel Jimma. That way, Amun-Re had combined all elements of creation and a universality of his own godness, if you want to call it this way, in one landscape, that is Karnak Temple, Luxor, and then the Tel Jimma area. Ritualization of this fabulous acts of creation, meaning the same God has to reenact this creation acts every year by leaving Karnak Temple, crossing the river to resurrect all the dead, present offerings to all the dead, especially his dead form and the entourage. And the other trip, he has to go to Luxor Temple to revitalize the fertility image of his own that resides in Karnak Temple and Luxor Temple. Then comes the royal Ka by Imhotep III and Ramses II, taking advantage of this ritual atmosphere of rejuvenation in Luxor Temple. The trip of Amun, although it's not mentioned in the cosmogony, but we have all archaeological evidence that proves that the trip of Amun leaving his own temple and moving all over the ritual landscape of Thebes, has been already started early in the Middle Kingdom, and way before that probably, when, as you can see here, a trip by Amun-Re going to probably a sanctuary that yet to be found, where a visit by Amun-Re goes to visit the Kamut-F image, or the Amun-Mi, or the fertility form of Amun. And that would make us talk about the north-south axis of Karnak Temple and how it's connected with Luxor Temple during the Epic Feast, or the Feast of Opet. Of course, the journey at some point took the river path, and a little harbor was right here to receive the boats of Amun. But initially it took the land route between Karnak and Luxor. So we have the creator form of Amun-Re right here, the fertility form of Amun-Re right here, with the royal Ka. When crossing the river, that's another one where Amun-Re has to leave Karnak and cross the river and goes to the temple of the tomb of the Ir-Ta and the Agduat. And here's the reference of how early this trip was. Probably during the Middle Kingdom, by some of the graffiti left on the mountains very close to the complex of Imhotep II. As you can see, the Wat priest Neferabed giving praise to Amun and kissing the ground before the Lord of the gods on his festival, the first day of Shamu, when he crosses over the day of voyaging to the valley of Nebhabetray by the Wat priest of Amun, Neferabed. That idea brings us to the valley, the Feast of the Valley, the mortuary feast. So if we have a feast for revitalization, that is the Opet feast, we have a feast for resurrection of the dead. And as you can see, it's very early in the Middle Kingdom that is attested. And another explanation, an early mention of these temples of millions of years from Dynasty 13, the statue of Neferkare Emiri from Dynasty 13. I would like to thank Professor LeBlanc for pointing out this reference to me. And as you can see, clearly this temples of millions of years is mentioned. And those are the temples that take in the linear form in parallel to the river. And as you can see right here is a clear mention of these temples of millions of years, where Amun-Re, on his way to visit the Ir-Ta that is buried in Tel Jimma, that is the place where Mendet Habu is, that is the southernmost mortuary temple on the west bank of Thebes. On his way to Tel Jimma, he has to stop right here. He has to stop at every temple of millions of years. And the good thing is, all of these temples of millions of years, as you can see, they've taken this linear form. They're all lined up, waiting for the visit of Amun-Re. And the good thing is, all the dedication texts in these temples of millions of years, none of them talk about this temple being dedicated to a dead king. They're all being dedicated to Amun-Re. Specifically mentioned that he built this monument for his father, Amun-Re, he being the king. So the owner of the temple here is Amun-Re, and the king is just the guest here. Amun-Re, on his way to the south, to Tel Jimma, right here, he has to make a stop at every single temple, including the Muntahatib-Nebhabit-Re and Hatshepsut temple. Residing there during the Feast of the Valley, that is mostly a mortuary feast for the resurrection of the dead. Guess who else would benefit from this visit by Amun-Re? All the tombs, and I just want to go back and explain to you that a processional way probably lies underground right here in front of all these temples of millions of years. And the other people that benefit from this visit would be all these people buried in the mountains of Thebes. They are built right behind the temples of millions of years and taken almost the same exact linear form. They're all lined up. Their orientation as west-east, or being facing east, has to do with the solar cycle and the solar hymns and all that. But what I'm most interested in is how these tombs, all of them, are oriented with entrances that just looks over the path where Amun-Re should take. And the important thing, when we see these banquet scenes, what used to be called banquet scenes, a lot of all these people, in most cases, you have in Ka so-and-so, for the Ka of so-and-so. So we're dealing with dead people already. It's a banquet of dead people, for dead people, because it just intersects perfectly with the purpose of the Feast of the Valley, with the purpose of the temple of Amun-Re. And here's some of these banquets as well. As I was just explaining, the reason all these temples, tombs have to be oriented like this and facing the path where Amun-Re, they probably would benefit from the same visit of the Feast of the Valley. So the very fact that there are 2 or 3 major places connected with the act of creation, the ground of Karnak, where all acts of creation have been performed by the Creator God, then Tel Jimma, where the dead form of Amun-Re buried, then the fertility form of Amun-Re in Luxor. 3 major locales in the literal landscape of Thebes that were coming into existence because of all these fabulous events that are connected with the cosmogony of Thebes, or the creation myth of Thebes. So, if I would like to conclude, I would like to say, in fact, the Theban cosmogony was a living myth. People had to repeat all these acts and celebrate the reenactments of the creation every year through these 2 festivals, the Opet and the Feast of the Valley. In fact, the Theban cosmogony was a living myth that inspired and justified religious activities and the formation of ritual landscape. In other words, the Theban sanctuaries presented the city's cosmogony in its ritual context, where the fabulous events of creation were ritually reenacted by the Creator God. Thank you very much, and welcome for every question.